All right, let's get into it. Our first topic on the show, we're going to talk about Derek Carr and his visit with the Saints and, of course, more recent news, the possibility that he could be the Jets' new quarterback. Now, of course, Joel, we're talking about your New York Jets. I want to get your thoughts. I want to hear you whether or not you're in on Derek Carr being the new Jets quarterback, or do you have someone else in mind?
First of all, if you've been listening to Pick a Side, we've been telling you about this for months. We've seen this probably 2 months ago. We really haven't had a Jets topic. It's funny. The playoffs start, and we stopped talking about the Jets.
I mean, that's just
crazy how that works.
That's just football for you.
We've been talking about this situation for over a month now. We knew that Derek Carr was going to be released right after the Super Bowl. Aaron Rodgers is going to have to wait to make his decision. Who knows what happens with Lamar? So we knew, and of course, that means the Jets and the front office knew that this would be the situation where they could go be aggressive, get Derek Carr early, and then possibly miss out on Aaron Rodgers or Lamar if he becomes available. Or you could do the opposite, meet with Derek Carr now, you sign him, but then, the other way around, you don't sign him, and now you could get Aaron Rodgers or Lamar, but now you miss out on Derek Carr. And what happens if you don't get any of them? Now you're stuck with Tannehill or Garoppolo, who I think we all agree Derek Carr's level above them, and below Lamar and Aaron Rodgers. So it's a tricky situation for the Jets and not one we really see often, right? Usually free agency, everyone's a free agent at the same time. Guys like Derek Carr's stature do not get cut before free agency, and we have this kind of weird in-between period. I think if you're the Jets, though, while Aaron Rodgers is obviously the big fish, he's out there, I think you need someone to be Matt Stafford. I think what the Rams did shows you Stafford, who is obviously not as good as someone like Patrick Mahomes or Burrow this year, even though he was on par. You need someone to have the ability to have a top 6 or 7 quarterback season, but not necessarily be a top 5 quarterback in the league. I think Matt Stafford is the perfect example where he had a fantastic season, a top 5 season last year. You could argue even higher since he went on to win the Super Bowl, but it's not like we regard him as Pat Mahomes and we put him in this tier that he didn't belong in. He just played really well in the system with a team that was perfectly built around him. They had pieces on offense, defense, obviously good coaching staff with Sean McVay. And I think that's what the Jets need. They need someone in here who's going to provide stability, who's going to elevate the offense when he needs to, but there's also going to be a complete team around him to really prop this team up, because I think even with Aaron Rodgers, it's going to be really hard to win the AFC just by itself, just given the nature of these other teams. So if you go from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr, I think there's still an opportunity. If you go from Derek Carr to Tannehill or Jimmy G, that's what I'm more scared of. And that's why the risk might be worth it, especially for someone like Lamar, who we're not really talking about yet. But if Lamar's available, super young still, he has MVP type ceiling. He could still be a top 5-6 quarterback year in and year out. Not so much with Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers. But I would not be upset at all if the Jets went the safe route, took Derek Carr or signed Derek Carr. You don't have to give any draft picks either. It's probably a little bit cheaper on the cap than Rodgers would be this year.
For sure.
Obviously, you're missing out a bit on the upside, but I think the safety and the security blanket is worth it.
I think this situation is interesting. I think, for the most part, what we've seen over the last month or so is Lamar is heavily favored to go to the NFC. Either the Falcons, the Panthers, the Lions. The Jets kind of have jumped in there as like a wild card team, but I think for the most part, Lamar to the NFC seems like the big picture. And then on the other hand, we've seen Aaron Rodgers, who's been linked to the Jets for some time now. He's expected to go there. And now Derek Carr is another guy who's popped up. We talked about it before. The window for winning a championship with a young roster is very small, because then you have to start paying people.
Facts.
And with the Jets, that defense is young. That offense is young. So you have a pretty small window to win, or at least be competitive for you guys. You guys haven't made it to the playoffs yet, so that's the first step. But you guys have a window to make the playoffs and then be competitive, especially in the AFC, where we keep talking about it all the time. This is the toughest conference by far. It's stacked from top to bottom. Even the bad teams are still competitive teams every other Sunday. So now, like teams like your Steelers and shit like that. So I say that to say, I think you sit on Derek Carr. I don't know if he can have a Matthew Stafford-like year, because even prior to that year, Matthew Stafford can always play at that level. I don't think Derek Carr is consistently showing you throughout his career that he's ever been on a Matthew Stafford level.
Right.
So I think the gap even between those two is still big, because I think the gap between Stafford and Mahomes is big, or the other top guys. But the gap between Stafford and Carr is pretty big. And even though Carr is much younger than Aaron Rodgers, he's not as expensive as Lamar. With Lamar, if you lock in on Lamar, you pretty much guarantee yourself a top 10 quarterback for the next 10 years, probably. You pretty much guarantee yourself somebody that has shown the ability to do more with less. You pretty much guarantee somebody that if all else breaks down, he can do things for you that can still win you a game on any given Sunday against any top team. So the gamble for Lamar is huge, but looking at your roster, I mean, Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, on the defensive end, you got Sauce. You got some guys out there. I think Quentin Williams, I forgot to even mention his name. You got some dogs out there to the point where
some dogs there.
You take the gamble for Derek Carr. You sit on Derek Carr. You're like, all right, it's tough, but you don't want to miss out on Aaron Rodgers and Lamar and then end up with nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't want to do that.
What if I told you get Aaron Rodgers for 1 year?
You gamble that.
Do you feel the same way?
Let me ask you.
If you get Aaron Rodgers, you can get Aaron Rodgers. Who I believe, in my honest heart, he is still a top 7 quarterback in the NFL and can still win at the highest level. If you can get him for 1 year, you do it. You take that gamble.
So you're telling me I only know I have Aaron Rodgers for 1 year. I don't know the outcome.
No, you don't.
Just
I think
1 year, that's it.
I do think that's the biggest concern with the Jets. I feel like if they knew for sure Rodgers was there for 2 years, we get 2 years at this, I think the gamble is definitely worth it then. But we see Rodgers, it's been every year. He doesn't know if he's coming back or returning. Now he's going to the Jets. It's a new team. He might hate the first year and go, and now you gave up picks and all this money. Now you need a quarterback again. So in this situation, I mean, there's a real possibility it's 1 year for Rodgers and that's it. Mm-hmm. Does that change anything? Because I feel like that's probably the meetings that are going on with Joe Douglas and his staff saying, is it worth it if we don't know day to day, week to week with Aaron Rodgers? He could just say, I'm done after one season. And now we missed out on maybe 3 or 4 years of Derek Carr or going with someone else.
I just think Derek Carr limits your ceiling. With Aaron, even though it may not be longer than a year, that puts you at the top of the food chain in the AFC. Like, that puts you up there with the top teams. Maybe not ahead of them, but Derek Carr doesn't really, elevate you to that status as much as Aaron Rodgers does because he's still one of the best.
Yeah, John.
There's some big issues with Derek Carr in New York. Obviously, two things can be true at once. The Raiders failed Derek Carr, right? At his peak, top 10, top 12 quarterback, they did nothing to support him and never had an elite defense, which the Jets do have. But Derek Carr is not a cold weather quarterback. I saw in Pittsburgh this last year, it was ugly. He got outplayed by Kenny Pickett. It wasn't even close. Derek Carr behind a poor offensive line. You don't know with Dwayne Brown's age, Mekhi Becton's injury concerns left tackle. That's a massive red flag for that Jets team. So you put Derek Carr behind that O-line, and, I mean, according to Spot Rack, his market value around $37 million. He's going to get paid north of 30. And so for the Jets, you look at Carr, he's probably peaked at 31 years old. And an AFC that has Mahomes, Burrow, Allen, Herbert, Lamar, Derek Carr is almost always in the playoffs going to be the inferior quarterback. So I look at what the Jets have, and you talked about this window. It's narrow because of how young the defense is, and in 2 years, a lot of those guys are going to get those extensions. But if I'm the Jets, if I'm Joe Douglas, I'm taking a shot here knowing the gap between Jimmy Garoppolo and Derek Carr is not this sizable difference. Sure, there is a gap, I would say, but the reward of
I think the gap is big because Jimmy G barely plays.
That's
Jimmy G is going to get hurt, and we don't really know what Jimmy G looks like without Kyle Shanahan.
Mm-hmm. That is
and
also,
he's going to, Hackett, there's some stats.
He looked good in New England.
Yes, small sample size.
2.5 games.
Very small sample
Bill
size.
Belichick is defense.
Yeah, but he's still
McDaniels.
Still Hall of Famer.
McDaniels, right? The guy who Derek Carr just got released because of.
It wasn't Derek Carr's fault.
No, Josh McDaniels would say otherwise.
I think it's both.
Do you think the Raiders are going to get an upgrade at quarterback?
No
way in hell.
No, but that is on Josh McDaniels. But I'm saying Josh McDaniels is the reason why we're even having this conversation of Derek Carr being a free agent.
I mean, Carr wasn't that great though this year.
This year he definitely was not as good as he was last year. For him to be 4,800 last year and then to not even crack 3,800 this year, it's messed up. He played
poor. Yeah, it was a bad year for Carr.
They both failed.
I didn't want to cut you off, John. You still
No, you're good. I mean, I just think for the Jets, you need to shoot big here at this roster because in this AFC, we see it every single year in the AFC Championship game. You're not seeing Ryan Tannehill get there nowadays with Herbert and all those quarterbacks developing. And so if you're New York, if you're Robert Saleh, you have to take the risk. I'm talking 2 first-round picks, knowing if you get Aaron, while there is a risk he retires after a year, the potential of him having that elite defense. The Packers were supposed to have it this last year. They did not have it. The Jets do. Garrett Wilson's wide receiver 1.
Packers barely had offense.
And hopefully Breece Hall coming back healthy. I think the other X factor is left tackle spot because quarterback's an issue, and I would much rather toss Aaron Rodgers out there than Derek Carr with his happy feet in the pocket, getting antsy, making terrible turnover-worthy plays. I do not trust Carr in New York, and I think he would be spit out within a year.
If you would have walked into the playoffs this year with Derek Carr, you would have had by far the worst quarterback in the AFC.
No, but I can say this, and I'm not a Jets fan, but you can say that if Derek Carr is their quarterback, they make the playoffs.
Oh, I mean,
Oh yeah.
We were winning games with Zach Wilson.
No, I'm with you
that's-
that.
but
But
that's
your
the-
ceiling still is maybe
It's
first round.
limited. It's limited.
With
The
Aaron,
defense, though.
you get in there.
We beat Buffalo.
Listen.
I know KC and Cincy are probably a tier above them, but Buffalo being that third team that maybe you see in the second round instead of
You think Derek Carr wins that game in Buffalo?
there's a chance.
In Buffalo, it would be
I don't
difficult.
know if it would be. It wouldn't just be Derek Carr. I mean, this would be a team
Well,
galvanizing.
no, I think you need at one point in the playoffs, you need
do.
your quarterback
to step up
I
for
was gonna
sure.
say, Riv, I understand where you're coming from because obviously the Jets quarterback was Zach Wilson, and we see
Oh no,
how
he's
that
dog
turned
shit.
out.
Yeah.
We see how that turned out. So I see where you're coming from. Does Derek Carr get you a win? It's because you had Zach Wilson, you were still staying
I think
afloat.
you get in undoubtedly with Derek Carr.
So now the primary focus does shift to whether Derek Carr elevates you guys from where you guys were. So I'll start by saying this. I understand where you're coming from, Joel, because you've gone through.
I'm so sorry. I don't mean to cut you off.
That's okay.
But I wanted to add this because
As you're eating a cookie, insane activity. Go ahead.
they love us. We're good.
No, for sure.
You said if we had Derek Carr, do we make the playoffs? So let me ask you. Let me add a monkey wrench to that. Who would you get over? Because Miami missed their quarterback for a lot of the season, which is why they dropped so low.
I think we would be able to get in the playoffs. We'd be able to beat Miami, the Chargers, the Jaguars.
With Derek Carr?
Yeah, yeah. Brees Hall's back too. You know,
But Vic Fangio now taking over the helm as defensive coordinator for the Dolphins. With the personnel they have, I expect them to have a huge increase in
No,
that.
I meant like who falls out? Because you got to think.
He's saying Miami.
Say
No,
Miami could fall
out
out.
the playoff hunt.
That's what he's. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I'm
with
sorry.
Tua.
I didn't understand your question at first, but yes, I would put the Jets over Miami.
Because the Ravens, Miami, both missed their quarterback for some time throughout the year. You know, with the
Assuming
concussion.
Lamar's back there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like-
Chargers.
Chargers in the
I would
conversation.
I would say like assuming health, everybody's good.
Yeah.
The Chargers would probably be the one that you would take.
Gotta watch out for the Broncos. I mean that with all due
Hey,
respect.
listen, the AFC
have
is
to be
loaded.
so
The
serious.
AFC stacked.
Respect us.
But
You're the
Earn it.
coach.
so you wouldn't go with Derek Carr?
I understand your vision because going through years and years of mediocre quarterback play.
Not mediocre, terrible.
No, I'm
Dog
being
shit.
kind. I'm being kind because you're my
The
friend.
worst in the NFL.
You're one of my best friends. I don't want to be rude.
Zach Wilson's dog shit.
You've gone through a lot of misery at the quarterback position, and you're happy with a quarterback that's going to come in and be competent. And that is understandable.
Ecstatic.
But I'm sorry. I'm the type of guy that wants the best available option, and I'm going to speak it out into the world, and I'm going to hope and pray for it because that's just the type of fan that I am. Now, if I'm the Jets, I see Derek Carr, and I'm pushing him aside. I'm not even thinking about him because the only person that should be on my mind is Lamar Jackson. Now, I understand, Riv, you made a good point. You don't think that they'll trade them. You trade Lamar Jackson in conference. That makes a lot of sense, of course. But the way that I think about it is, if I'm the Ravens, I want the best possible deal.
Yeah.
And if the Jets are going to offer them if the Jets are going to offer the most amount of picks, if they're going to offer him good skill
Yeah, that's
position
true.
players, the Ravens would not be very wise to turn that down for a team like Atlanta. In terms of Atlanta can give you good draft capital for sure, but are they really going to give you any position players worth of value
Who would
if
the
you're
Jets
the Ravens?
give up though?
You don't see usually a lot of player-for-player trades.
Yeah.
No, it's not player for players, of course, but it's going to be a combination of both. Like the way that the Broncos were able to trade for Russell Wilson. We
Yeah.
traded 2 first-round picks. We traded 2 second-round picks. We traded Shelby Harris. We traded Noah Fant. We traded Drew Lock. It's like, of course, if you're the Jets, you don't want to trade Quinnen, but you understand
trade
that that time is coming that he's going to want a big payday.
I don't
Now,
think
is
the
it
Ravens would do
essential?
that.
Is it essential that you bring in a D tackle? Well, I only say that because is Calais Campbell going to go back to the
Yeah,
to the
but
Ravens?
I don't think it makes sense for the Ravens to trade for Quinn and then pay him.
Financially, I understand where you're coming from, but I mean,
They
if I'm the
just paid
Jets,
Roquan, too.
They just did.
yes, but if you're not going to, if you're the Ravens, now at this point, you're trying to find a new quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm expecting that to be found through the draft if you're the Ravens, especially if you're acquiring all this draft capital. If you're trading Lamar Jackson, you're not going to go on the free agent market and find another Lamar. It's
Tyler
not
Huntley
happening.
will be your starting quarterback for the next year.
Correct, and I'm sure. I mean, we're talking about a Pro Bowler, so put some respect on his name.
He can win some
No,
games.
I'm obviously joking, but if I'm the Ravens and I'm trading Lamar Jackson, my only expectation from the outside looking in is that they're going to try and draft their quarterback. So I'm looking at the Jets, and I see that, yes, Joel, I understand where you're coming from. You're a Jets fan. Quinnen Williams just had an all-pro season. You've been waiting for this for seasons. But financially, if it means I have to give up Quinnen amongst also giving up 2, 3 first-round picks to acquire Lamar Jackson to have the best quarterback in my franchise's history, I'm sorry, I'm doing it. And if I'm the Ravens, what is going to be better than 3 firsts, maybe a second or 2, and Quinnen Williams? I really don't find a better package out there. Yes, the Falcons are intriguing because they're out of conference. I think that when we had our conversation earlier about potentially Lamar Jackson being traded, Atlanta was my preferred destination outside of the Jets. But the way I see it, if I'm the Jets, I'm going all in. I understand that this defense is very, very good, one of the best defense in the league, and Quinnen's a huge part of that. You trade Quinnen, that'll be a blow. But what you desperately needed is the quarterback, and you add Lamar Jackson to the mix with Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore. I understand Corey Davis is limited, but he's still a very solid option, especially at wide receiver 3. I was going to say, there's a potential that he might not even be on the roster as well. And if I'm the Jets, I am looking to upgrade at the tight end position, but we're talking about potentially the best skills position room that Lamar Jackson's had in his career.
Easily, actually.
Easily strong. You know I'm a fan of Hollywood Brown.
You are.
Obviously, Mark Andrews is a top 3 tight end at minimum, but Breece Hall is a star in the making. He would have been Rookie of the Year had he stayed healthy, in my opinion. Garrett Wilson is a superstar in the making. Star's not kind enough. He is a superstar in the making.
Yeah. No, our disconnect is just Hollywood.
And that's fine. And I trust Joe Douglas. I understand he made a huge mistake by drafting Zach Wilson, and that'll always be on his resume for potentially drafting the worst draft pick in NFL history, up there with Jamarcus Russell and Ryan Leaf. But the pieces that he's put around this Jets team has been phenomenal. He's been able to maximize his opportunity as Jets GM minus Zach Wilson. But I fully trust that if he were to bring in a quarterback, if I'm Joe Douglas, I'm sorry, my one-track mind is on Lamar Jackson.